Hi, my name is Miss Lynn, and I'm going to share a story with you today. At the end of the story, there will be some questions. You'll know the questions are coming when they start with, I wonder. These questions are the kind where there's no right or wrong answer. You might hear a question and just know what the answer is. There might be another question that you have many answers to, and there might be a question that you don't have any answers to at all. Or maybe you don't even understand the question. And all of that is okay. You can just say as many or as few answers as you have. If you're watching with someone else, you might even have different answers than the other person has, and that's okay too. So, let's get ourselves ready to enter the story. This is a map of Jerusalem from the time of Jesus. It was already an ancient city by that time. No one knows exactly when Jerusalem was first built, but today it is well over 3,000 years old, and it is a place of pilgrimage for Christians, for Jews, and for Muslims. About 1,000 years before Jesus was born, King David entered the city through the south and captured the city from the Jebusites and made it his own. King David's son Solomon built the first temple in Jerusalem. Later, the temple was burned by the Babylonians. They captured a lot of people from the city of Jerusalem, and they forced those people into exile far away. When the people of Jerusalem were able to return again, they rebuilt the temple. It was rebuilt again and expanded by King Herod by the time Jesus was born. These are the walls of the city. Here is the temple. Here is the place where the upper room was, or at least as much as anyone can tell so many centuries later. Here is the Roman fortress of Antonia. Here is the palace of Caiaphas, the high priest. Here is Herod's palace. The Kidron Valley ran along the city to the east side. Some say a bridge might have connected the city to the Mount of Olives, but others are not so sure. This is where the Garden of Gethsemane was, and it still is here today. This is Golgotha, the place of the skull. This is where Jesus died on the cross for us. Jesus went to Jerusalem many times, even as a baby and as a boy. Once you might remember the story that Mother Mary and Father Joseph found him in the temple area talking to the priests. But this story is about the last time that Jesus went to Jerusalem. We remember it every year during the time we call Holy Week. Jesus and the 12 came from the south, from Galilee, along the twisting Jordan River to Jericho. In Jericho, Jesus healed the blind man called Bartimaeus, and he had supper there with a short man, a tax collector called Zacchaeus. When they left Jericho, they crossed the low desert and began to climb up slowly toward the city. Perhaps Jesus and the disciples spent the Sabbath at rest in Bethany, a short way from the city. On Sunday, Jesus sent 2 of the disciples ahead to borrow a donkey. He rode the donkey into the city, probably through the southern gate. And they made his way along the pilgrim route, through the oldest part of the city and up toward the Temple Mount. Some people noticed this. They thought he might be the Messiah, and they cut palm branches and waved them. They threw their coats on his path in front of the donkey, and they shouted, "Hosanna, Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Others were opening their shops. Fruit and cheese and wine and bread were being set out on rough wooden tables to sell. Jesus and the 12 climbed up the limestone slabs that made a street of steps until they finally came to an open area. There they must have left the donkey and decided to enter the temple to pray. Perhaps they went in through the double gate, up these stairs and in the double gate, or they could have come in the side gate here. We know that they couldn't have come through the triple gate because the triple gate was reserved only for priests. When they reached the Temple Mount, they came out into a broad open courtyard and crossed it to enter the temple to pray. When their prayers were finished, they left the Temple Mount and went outside the city wall, across the Kidron Valley, and to the Mount of Olives to spend the night. On Monday morning, Jesus probably went again to the Temple Mount and began to teach. He no doubt taught where the other rabbis were teaching, along the southwest part of the great courtyard called the Court of the Gentiles. That evening, they went back to the Mount of Olives to sleep. On Tuesday, perhaps they came up the stairs inside the temple and into the long royal portico. This is where the Sanhedrin met at the far end. The money changers and merchants were there. Jesus became angry about all this buying and selling in such a holy place. He turned over the tables of the money changers and upset those selling birds in little cages and other animals for sacrifices. He called for the people to keep the temple a place of prayer. The guards began to watch him carefully. They also noticed how the crowds listening to him were growing. Jesus and the 12 returned that evening to the Mount of Olives, or perhaps to Bethany, to sleep. The people watched them cross the Kidron Valley again and began to talk about a legend that the Mount of Olives was where the Messiah was to come down from heaven and lead an army of angels to drive away the Roman soldiers. On Wednesday, the crowds listening to him grew larger, and the guards really became worried. They began to think about how they would arrest him. That evening, Jesus and the 12 crossed over to the Mount of Olives once more. Perhaps as the sun set over the temple, Jesus talked with Peter, Andrew, James, and John. We know that they asked him privately what was going to happen. On Thursday, the guards were ready to take Jesus, but he did not appear on the Temple Mount. The disciples had asked Jesus where they would be having the Passover. Jesus told them to go into the city and to look for a man carrying a water jar. He would show them the place. When evening came, they crossed the Kidron Valley and went into the city to the appointed house. They climbed up the stairs in the upper room and had their Last Supper together. After they had everything they wanted to eat, Jesus shared the bread and the wine with them and said that he would always be with them especially in the bread and wine. They did not understand what he meant, but they would not forget. Jesus also told them to love one another, and he showed how to care for each other by washing their feet. After that, Judas hurried away into the darkness of the city. The rest went back to the Mount of Olives. Now it was late. They could barely see the lights of Jerusalem across the way. Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, while the disciples fell asleep. When Jesus came back from his prayers, the soldiers from the temple came out of the darkness and took him away. Judas was with them and showed Jesus to them. They took him back into the city and finally to the house of Caiaphas, the high priest. There the priests asked him questions, but he did not answer. And finally the high priest tore his robes and cried out, "Blasphemy!" They convicted Jesus of the crime of pretending to be God. After that, the temple guards probably took Jesus to a jail in the Roman fortress of Antonia. On Friday morning, Jesus was brought to Pilate, the Roman governor. Pilate asked Jesus questions. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "You have said so," but had nothing else to say. When Jesus would not answer, Pilate sent him to Herod, the son of Herod the Great, who had built the temple and had died about 34 years before. Herod grew tired of Jesus and sent him back to Pilate in the fortress of Antonia. Pilate then showed Jesus to the crowd. There was a tradition to release a prisoner at the time of Passover. Pilate asked the crowd if he should release Judas or Barabbas. They shouted, "Barabbas! Barabbas!" The soldiers prepared Jesus to be crucified. They took him through the streets to Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they hung him on the cross, and he died. People still walk along these streets to remember Jesus and pray. Today, they move from a school that is at the place where the Fortress Antonia used to be, down the streets of the Via Dolorosa, or the Street of Sadness, all the way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. After Jesus died, the disciples took him down from the cross, and then they placed him in a tomb nearby, given by Joseph of Arimathea. A great stone was rolled in front of the tomb to close it up tight like a locked door. On Saturday, everything was quiet. On Sunday, the women had the courage to go to the tomb just to be close to Jesus. When they got there, they found the stone had been rolled away and discovered that somehow Jesus was still with them, as he is still with us today. What part of the story did you like the best? What part of the story was the most important? I wonder, what part of the story is about you? Where are you in the story? I wonder, is there any part of the story that we can leave out and still have all the story we need? I wonder, what can we do in our church during Holy Week to remember this? I wonder if there's more we can do to mark this special week.